You're very welcome. I'm glad I could be of support. Thank you for your love and subscription to Illuminate Peak. I hope the stories and insights shared there will continue to inspire and empower you on your own journey of growth and transformation. If you ever need more guidance or have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Wishing you all the best on your path to becoming the confident and authentic person you were meant to be. In a world where I once struggled to break free from the confines of being a nice guy, a transformative journey unfolded, reshaping my very essence. This is the story of how No More Mr. Nice Guy became my guiding light, leading me through chapters of self-discovery, embracing authenticity, and finding true empowerment. Listen closely as I share the wisdom that paved the way to becoming a confident and assertive man, inspiring you to embark on your own path of self-discovery and liberation. Join me as I take you on a riveting journey of growth, vulnerability, and the celebration of progress, where the power of change lies within each of us. Welcome to a story of transformation that will resonate deep within your soul, urging you to embrace your authentic self and unlock the unyielding strength that lies within. Chapter 1: No More Mr. Nice Guy. Let me take you back to a time when I was living life as a people pleaser, a man who couldn't say no to anyone. I was Neil, the nice guy, always putting others' needs ahead of my own. It was as if I was afraid that if I asserted myself, I would lose the approval and validation I so desperately craved. Growing up, I was taught to be polite, kind, and considerate, all great qualities, but I took them to the extreme. I became a doormat, allowing people to walk all over me, constantly sacrificing my happiness and dreams for the sake of others. I thought being selfless was the path to being liked and respected, but it was slowly eroding my self-esteem and sense of identity. The more I tried to please everyone, the more I lost myself in the process. Deep down, I yearned to be confident and assertive, to speak up for myself and pursue my desires without fear of judgment. Yet, that fear of rejection and disapproval held me back, trapping me in a cycle of frustration and unfulfillment. One day, while browsing through a bookstore, a title caught my eye, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. It felt like fate had led me to this book, as if it held the key to the transformation I desperately needed. As I flipped through its pages, I discovered that there was a name for what I was experiencing, the nice guy syndrome. Reading about the experiences of other men who had gone through similar struggles, I realized that I was not alone. Many of us had grown up with the belief that being nice and accommodating would lead to happiness and success, only to find ourselves feeling unappreciated and unsatisfied. Glover's words struck a chord deep within me. He helped me understand that being a nice guy wasn't truly nice, it was a facade to mask my insecurities and a strategy to seek external validation. I was seeking approval outside myself, but what I truly needed was to approve of and accept myself. The book spoke about the importance of being authentic and honest about my desires and needs. I had to stop suppressing my true self and start communicating openly with others. Glover challenged me to let go of the fear of rejection and to embrace vulnerability, understanding that it was essential for building meaningful connections. He also emphasized the importance of setting boundaries. For too long, I had allowed people to take advantage of my willingness to please. Now, I needed to establish clear limits to protect my time, energy, and emotional well-being. As I continued to read, it became clear that my transformation from the nice guy to a confident and assertive man would not happen overnight. It required introspection, self-compassion, and the willingness to step out of my comfort zone. Chapter 1 was just the beginning of my journey, but it was a significant step toward self-awareness and growth. I knew I had a long road ahead, but I was determined to break free from the chains of the nice guy syndrome and create a life that was truly fulfilling. Little did I know that the wisdom and insights from this book would become my guiding light, leading me towards becoming the man I was meant to be, a man who respected himself, set boundaries, pursued his passions, and embraced his authenticity. My friend, as you read this, I hope you can see yourself in my story. If you, too, are tired of being a doormat, take that first step and say to yourself, "No more Mr. Nice Guy." Embrace the journey of transformation, and you'll find a version of yourself that is stronger, happier, and more fulfilled than ever before. Chapter 2: Identifying the Patterns. As I delved deeper into No More Mr. Nice Guy, I found myself on a path of self-discovery. It was time to face the patterns that had been holding me back and preventing me from becoming the confident and assertive man I desired to be. Glover's book highlighted the common traits and behaviors of the nice guy syndrome. I saw myself in those pages: the constant need for approval, avoiding conflict at all costs, and being overly accommodating even when it went against my own wishes. It was like holding a mirror up to my life, and the reflection was both eye-opening and uncomfortable. One of the most significant patterns I recognized was my fear of rejection. I had been so preoccupied with pleasing others that I rarely took risks or pursued my dreams. I was afraid of putting myself out there, afraid that if I failed or faced criticism, I would lose the acceptance I had worked so hard to gain. Another pattern was my inability to be assertive. I had always avoided confrontation, even when it meant suppressing my own needs and desires. Instead of expressing my thoughts and feelings openly, I would bury them deep inside, creating a growing sense of frustration and resentment. Reading about these patterns was like untangling a web that had been woven around me for years. It was liberating to realize that I wasn't alone in my struggles and that there was a way out. Recognizing the patterns was the first step towards breaking free from their grip. With newfound awareness, I began to pay attention to my thoughts and actions. Every time I felt the urge to seek validation or avoid conflict, I paused and asked myself why. What was I truly afraid of? What was the worst that could happen if I asserted myself? The more I questioned myself, the more I uncovered the root causes of my patterns. They stem from my childhood, where I had learned that being nice and pleasing others would make me lovable and accepted. But that belief was flawed, and it was time to rewire my thinking. Glover's book urged me to challenge my beliefs and replace them with healthier ones. It was time to embrace the idea that I was deserving of love and respect, regardless of whether everyone liked me or not. It was time to understand that being assertive and standing up for myself didn't make me a bad person, it made me authentic. Identifying the patterns was not an easy process. It required vulnerability and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about myself. But as I did so, I began to feel a newfound sense of empowerment. I was taking charge of my life, not allowing external factors to dictate my happiness or self-worth. Slowly but surely, I started to make changes in my interactions with others. I began to set boundaries, respectfully expressing my needs and expectations. Some people were taken aback by my newfound assertiveness, but surprisingly, most respected and appreciated it. As I continued on this journey of self-discovery, I realized that identifying the patterns was just the beginning. It was the groundwork upon which I would build my transformation. With each passing day, I grew more confident in my ability to become the man I wanted to be, a man who embraced his authenticity, communicated honestly, and lived life on his terms. My friend, as you read about my journey of identifying the patterns, I encourage you to take a closer look at your own life. Reflect on the behaviors and beliefs that might be holding you back. Embrace this process of self-discovery, and know that you have the power to break free from the patterns that no longer serve you. As you do, you'll pave the way for a future filled with self-assurance, contentment, and authentic connections. Chapter 3: Embracing My Authentic Self. As I continued my journey through No More Mr. Nice Guy, I realized that embracing my authentic self was a fundamental step towards becoming the confident and assertive man I desired to be. It was time to shed the mask I had worn for so long and embrace the person I truly was. For years, I had hidden my true thoughts and feelings behind a veneer of niceness, afraid that revealing my authentic self would lead to rejection. But I now understood that my authentic self was not something to be ashamed of, it was the essence of who I was, with all my strengths and vulnerabilities. Glover's book taught me that being authentic meant being honest with myself and others. I needed to stop seeking approval and validation from external sources and start accepting myself for who I was, all flaws and all. It was time to be real, even if it meant being vulnerable. I began by identifying my passions and interests, things that brought me joy and fulfillment. I had suppressed many of these interests, believing they were not nice or that others might not approve. But as I started to explore them again, I felt a renewed sense of enthusiasm and purpose. Embracing my authentic self also meant being honest about my desires and needs. Instead of constantly putting others first, I learned to communicate my wants and expectations openly. This was a significant shift for me, but it was crucial for building genuine connections with others. At first, I was afraid that being authentic might lead to rejection or disapproval. But to my surprise, the opposite happened. People respected and appreciated my honesty. By embracing my authentic self, I attracted individuals who valued me for who I truly was, not for the facade I had previously presented. Of course, there were moments of discomfort and fear along the way. It took courage to peel back the layers I had built up over the years. But with each step I took towards authenticity, I felt a sense of liberation that I had never experienced before. Another aspect of embracing my authentic self was learning to accept my imperfections. I had always held myself to impossibly high standards, expecting perfection in every aspect of my life. But in doing so, I had set myself up for constant disappointment and self-criticism. Glover's book reminded me that it was okay to be imperfect, that it was a part of being human. Instead of beating myself up over every mistake, I learned to treat myself with compassion and understanding. I began to see that my imperfections were what made me uniquely me. As I continued on this path of embracing my authentic self, I noticed a profound shift in my relationships. The connections I formed were deeper and more meaningful because they were based on mutual respect and understanding. I no longer felt the need to impress or please others, I simply focused on being true to myself. Each day brought new opportunities to embrace my authenticity, and I eagerly welcomed them. I let go of the need to seek external validation and found validation within myself. I stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't and started living a life that felt genuine and fulfilling. Embracing my authentic self was a transformative process that touched every aspect of my life. It allowed me to connect with others on a deeper level, pursue my passions without hesitation, and set boundaries with confidence. It was a journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance that would continue to shape the man I was becoming. My friend, as you read about my experience of embracing my authentic self, I encourage you to reflect on your own journey. Embrace who you truly are, with all your strengths and vulnerabilities. Allow yourself to be honest, open, and unapologetically real. Embracing your authentic self is a powerful step towards personal growth and fulfillment, and it will lead you to a life that feels genuine and deeply satisfying. Chapter 4: Owning My Desires and Needs. As I continued to immerse myself in the wisdom of No More Mr. Nice Guy, I came to a critical realization: I needed to start owning my desires and needs. For far too long, I had suppressed my wants, putting the needs of others ahead of my own. It was time to break free from this pattern and embrace my innermost desires. Glover's book taught me that my desires and needs were valid and essential. I had to stop ignoring them or pretending they didn't matter. It was time to prioritize myself and take responsibility for my own happiness and well-being. Owning my desires began with acknowledging them without judgment. I allowed myself to dream, to envision a life that was truly fulfilling. As I explored my aspirations, I recognized that it was not selfish to pursue what brought me joy. In fact, it was necessary for my personal growth and fulfillment. But simply acknowledging my desires wasn't enough, I had to take action. This required courage and assertiveness. Instead of waiting for others to fulfill my needs, I learned to communicate them openly and honestly. I started expressing my preferences, wishes, and boundaries without fear of rejection. Of course, it wasn't always easy. There were moments of discomfort and uncertainty, but I reminded myself that I was worth it. I deserved to have my needs met just as much as anyone else did. This shift in mindset empowered me to advocate for myself and create a life that aligned with my true self. As I began to own my desires and needs, I also discovered that it was essential to let go of the need for external validation. I no longer sought approval from others for my choices. Instead, I relied on my own judgment and intuition to guide me on my path. Owning my desires also meant taking responsibility for my actions and decisions. I stopped blaming others for my unhappiness and recognized that I had the power to shape my life. This newfound sense of agency fueled my determination to create the life I wanted, free from the constraints of seeking approval. In relationships, owning my desires and needs led to a remarkable transformation. I stopped trying to be everything for everyone and instead focused on building authentic connections. I surrounded myself with people who respected and appreciated me for who I truly was. Setting boundaries became a crucial aspect of owning my desires. I recognized that it was okay to say no and prioritize my needs. By doing so, I preserved my time, energy, and emotional well-being. I no longer felt like a doormat, but rather a person with agency and self-respect. As I continued to integrate this new way of being into my life, I found that the more I owned my desires and needs, the more content and empowered I felt. I began to attract people who valued my authenticity and respected my boundaries. My relationships became deeper and more meaningful because they were built on honesty and mutual understanding. Owning my desires and needs was a powerful step towards becoming the man I wanted to be, a man who was confident, assertive, and true to himself. It was liberating to release the shackles of seeking approval and start living life on my terms. My friend, as you read about my journey of owning my desires and needs, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. Embrace your desires without judgment, and know that they are valid and essential. Communicate your needs honestly and assertively, without fear of rejection. You deserve to have a life that aligns with your true self, and by owning your desires and needs, you'll pave the way for a future filled with empowerment, satisfaction, and meaningful connections. Chapter 5: Building Boundaries. As I delved further into the pages of No More Mr. Nice Guy, I learned that building boundaries was a crucial aspect of my transformation. Setting clear limits was essential for my well-being, allowing me to protect my time, energy, and emotions from being drained by others' demands. In the past, I had been a people pleaser, always putting others' needs before my own. I had allowed people to take advantage of my kindness and found myself feeling overwhelmed and resentful. It was time to put an end to this cycle and create boundaries that would serve as a protective shield around my heart and mind. Glover's book provided practical advice on setting boundaries in various areas of life, relationships, work, and personal time. I began by identifying the areas where I needed to establish limits and started communicating my boundaries clearly and assertively. In relationships, I learned to say no when something didn't align with my values or priorities. It wasn't easy at first, as I had a deep-rooted fear of disappointing others. But as I practiced setting boundaries, I realized that I wasn't pushing people away, I was simply defining what was acceptable to me. Building boundaries also meant recognizing and respecting my own needs. I started prioritizing self-care and made time for activities that brought me joy and relaxation. This not only improved my well-being but also allowed me to show up more fully in my relationships and responsibilities. At work, I stopped overcommitting and taking on tasks that weren't mine to handle. I learned to delegate when appropriate and communicate my limitations to colleagues and superiors. Surprisingly, people respected my honesty and appreciated the clarity I provided. Personal time was another area where boundaries were essential. I used to sacrifice my leisure time to accommodate others' demands, leaving me feeling drained and unfulfilled. By setting aside time for myself, I was able to pursue my hobbies and interests, which recharged my energy and boosted my confidence. Of course, building boundaries was a learning process. There were times when I felt guilty or worried that people might react negatively to my newfound assertiveness. But I reminded myself that I had the right to protect my well-being and that those who truly cared about me would understand and respect my boundaries. As I continued to build boundaries, I noticed a significant shift in my relationships and interactions with others. People began to recognize and appreciate my self-respect, and they treated me with more consideration and respect in return. Building boundaries also allowed me to focus on my personal growth and pursue my passions without feeling guilty. I no longer carried the burden of trying to please everyone, and that freed up space for personal development and fulfillment. In the end, building boundaries became an essential pillar of my transformation. It was a liberating experience to establish limits that protected my self-worth and allowed me to live a more balanced and authentic life. My friend, as you read about my journey of building boundaries, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. Identify the areas where you need to set limits and communicate your needs assertively. Remember that building boundaries is not about pushing people away, but rather about respecting yourself and creating a life that aligns with your values and aspirations. Embrace this process, and you'll find yourself becoming more assertive, confident, and in control of your own destiny. Chapter 6: Finding My Purpose. As I continued my transformative journey through the pages of No More Mr. Nice Guy, I realized that finding my purpose was a pivotal step towards becoming the man I wanted to be. It was time to discover what truly lit a fire within me, what brought me a sense of fulfillment and meaning in life. For so long, I had lived my life in a reactive mode, constantly trying to please others and seeking validation from external sources. I felt like I was drifting, lacking a clear direction and passion. But as I delved into the book, I understood that finding my purpose required looking inward and connecting with my authentic self. Glover's book challenged me to explore my passions, interests, and values. I began by asking myself some fundamental questions. What makes me come alive? What activities or causes bring me joy? What values do I hold dear? These questions helped me to uncover the passions that had been buried beneath my people-pleasing tendencies. As I explored my interests, I noticed that some of them had been suppressed or overlooked because I feared they wouldn't align with the image of the nice guy. But now, I embraced them fully, understanding that they were essential to my identity and happiness. Finding my purpose was not about discovering a grand, life-altering mission. It was about identifying the small things that brought me joy and fulfillment in everyday life. It was about finding activities that made me lose track of time and gave me a sense of purpose beyond seeking external validation. With newfound clarity about my passions, I began to incorporate them into my daily life. Whether it was a hobby, volunteering for a cause I cared about, or pursuing a new career path, I made a conscious effort to prioritize activities that aligned with my purpose. I also learned to set goals that were in line with my newfound purpose. Instead of setting goals based on what others expected of me, I set them based on what truly mattered to me. This shift in focus gave me a sense of direction and motivation, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Finding my purpose also had a profound impact on my relationships. I surrounded myself with people who supported and encouraged my growth and passions. Instead of seeking validation from others, I found validation within myself, knowing that I was living a life that felt true to who I was. As I pursued my purpose, I discovered a sense of fulfillment and contentment that I had never experienced before. I felt more connected to myself and the world around me. The void that had once been filled with the need for approval was now brimming with a sense of purpose and self-assurance. Of course, finding my purpose was not a one-time event, it was an ongoing process of self-discovery and growth. As I continued to explore my passions and values, my purpose evolved and deepened, enriching every aspect of my life. My friend, as you read about my journey of finding my purpose, I encourage you to embark on your own exploration. Reflect on your passions, interests, and values. Embrace the things that bring you joy and meaning. Finding your purpose is a powerful step towards living a fulfilling and purposeful life, and it will guide you towards becoming the confident, authentic, and empowered man you were meant to be. Chapter 7: Building Self-Reliance. As I continued my transformation journey, the concept of building self-reliance emerged as a key pillar in reshaping my identity as a man. No more Mr. Nice Guy had already guided me through identifying patterns, embracing my authentic self, and finding my purpose. Now, it was time to take ownership of my life and become self-reliant. For so long, I had relied on external sources for validation, approval, and direction. I sought reassurance from others, believing that their opinions held more weight than my own. But I now understood that true confidence came from within, from trusting myself and my abilities. Building self-reliance required embracing my strengths and recognizing my ability to handle life's challenges independently. It meant letting go of the need for constant approval and seeking guidance from my inner compass. One of the first steps towards building self-reliance was nurturing self-compassion. Instead of berating myself for mistakes or perceived shortcomings, I learned to treat myself with kindness and understanding. I acknowledged that I was human and that making mistakes was a natural part of the learning process. Glover's book encouraged me to take risks and step out of my comfort zone. I began to tackle new challenges, no longer afraid of failure or rejection. Each step outside my comfort zone brought a sense of empowerment and an understanding that I was capable of handling whatever life threw my way. I also learned to rely on my intuition. Instead of seeking approval from others, I started trusting my gut feelings and making decisions based on what felt right for me. This shift allowed me to live more authentically, making choices that aligned with my values and aspirations. Building self-reliance also meant taking responsibility for my own happiness and success. Instead of waiting for external validation or relying on others to fulfill my needs, I recognized that I had the power to create the life I desired. I set clear goals and worked towards them, understanding that my happiness depended on my actions and choices. In relationships, self-reliance allowed me to maintain a sense of independence and individuality. I no longer depended on others for my sense of self-worth. Instead, I brought my own value to the table. This newfound confidence attracted people who appreciated and respected me for who I was. As I built self-reliance, I learned that it wasn't about shutting others out or being completely self-sufficient. It was about finding a healthy balance, knowing when to ask for help and when to rely on my own strengths and capabilities. Over time, I found that building self-reliance was a transformative process. It liberated me from the need for external validation, allowing me to trust myself and my decisions. It gave me the courage to pursue my dreams without fear of judgment. Most importantly, it nurtured a deep sense of self-respect and self-assurance. My friend, as you read about my journey of building self-reliance, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. Embrace the idea that true confidence comes from within, from trusting yourself and your abilities. Nurture self-compassion, take risks, and make decisions based on your intuition. Building self-reliance will empower you to create a life that is truly your own, and it will lead you towards becoming the strong, confident, and resilient man you were always meant to be. Chapter 8: Embracing Vulnerability. As I continued my transformational journey, I encountered a concept that initially made me uncomfortable but soon became a powerful source of strength: embracing vulnerability. In No More Mr. Nice Guy, I learned that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness but rather a pathway to deeper connections and personal growth. For most of my life, I had avoided vulnerability, fearing that it would expose me to rejection or judgment. I wore a mask of strength and self-sufficiency, believing that showing any sign of weakness would make me less desirable or respected. But as I delved into the book, I realized that vulnerability was an essential part of being human. Embracing vulnerability meant allowing myself to be authentic and honest about my feelings and experiences. It required being open and transparent, even when it felt uncomfortable or risky. It meant setting aside the facade of the nice guy and revealing my true self to others. Glover's book taught me that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness but a display of courage and strength. It took courage to share my fears, insecurities, and struggles with others. It took strength to be open about my desires, needs, and emotions without the fear of judgment. I began to practice vulnerability in my relationships, sharing my thoughts and feelings with those I trusted. It was not an easy process. It required breaking down the walls I had built around myself over the years. But with each step, I felt a sense of liberation and connection that I had never experienced before. Embracing vulnerability allowed me to connect with others on a deeper level. I realized that when I showed my authentic self, it invited others to do the same. The walls that had once separated me from meaningful connections started to crumble, and I felt a sense of closeness and understanding with the people in my life. In embracing vulnerability, I also learned to accept and express my emotions without judgment. I allowed myself to feel sadness, anger, and joy without trying to suppress or hide them. This emotional honesty deepened my connection with myself and others, fostering an environment of trust and authenticity. Vulnerability also allowed me to grow as an individual. By acknowledging my weaknesses and areas of growth, I became more receptive to feedback and self-improvement. I no longer feared making mistakes or facing challenges. Instead, I saw them as opportunities for learning and personal development. As I continued to embrace vulnerability, I noticed that it not only strengthened my relationships with others but also deepened my relationship with myself. I became more compassionate towards myself, recognizing that vulnerability was a natural part of the human experience. My friend, as you read about my journey of embracing vulnerability, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. Embrace the courage to be open and honest about your feelings and experiences. Allow yourself to be vulnerable, knowing that it is a powerful source of strength and connection. Embracing vulnerability will enrich your relationships and your relationship with yourself, guiding you towards becoming a more authentic, empathetic, and resilient man. Chapter 9: Celebrating Progress. As my journey of self-discovery and transformation continued, I learned the importance of celebrating progress, both big and small. In No More Mr. Nice Guy, I discovered that acknowledging my growth and accomplishments was essential for building self-esteem and maintaining momentum on my path to becoming a more assertive and confident man. In the past, I had been quick to dismiss my achievements, always looking ahead to the next goal without taking a moment to appreciate how far I had come. But now, I understood that celebrating progress was not about being boastful or arrogant. It was about recognizing my efforts and giving myself credit for the steps I had taken. Glover's book taught me that progress was not linear. There would be ups and downs along the way. Instead of getting discouraged by setbacks, I learned to view them as opportunities for learning and growth. Each obstacle I overcame was a testament to my resilience and determination. I began to acknowledge the small victories, celebrating even the tiniest steps towards my goals. Whether it was asserting myself in a conversation, setting a boundary, or pursuing a passion, I took the time to pat myself on the back and acknowledge my progress. Celebrating progress also involved acknowledging my personal growth. I reflected on the changes I had made in my thought patterns and behaviors. I recognized how far I had come from the nice guy who sought validation and approval from others. I was evolving into a man who valued himself and embraced his authenticity. As I celebrated my progress, I also learned to accept compliments from others graciously. Instead of deflecting praise or feeling unworthy, I embraced the kind words and allowed them to reinforce my self-esteem. I realized that accepting compliments with gratitude was an acknowledgement of my growth and a validation of my efforts. One of the most significant shifts I experienced through celebrating progress was a change in my perspective. Instead of focusing solely on the end goal, I learned to find joy and fulfillment in the journey itself. Each step forward became a cause for celebration, bringing a sense of purpose and contentment to my daily life. Celebrating progress not only boosted my self-confidence but also inspired me to continue striving for personal growth. Each time I acknowledged my progress, I felt motivated to keep pushing myself further, embracing new challenges with enthusiasm and determination. In my relationships, celebrating progress created a positive feedback loop. As I acknowledged and celebrated the growth and achievements of others, they, too, felt encouraged and supported. This mutual celebration of progress strengthened our connections and fostered a sense of camaraderie. My friend, as you read about my journey of celebrating progress, I encourage you to reflect on your own life. Take the time to acknowledge your growth, no matter how small it may seem. Celebrate your achievements and use them as fuel to propel you towards your goals. Embrace the journey and find joy in each step forward. Celebrating progress will nurture your self-esteem and inspire you to continue evolving into the confident, authentic, and assertive man you are meant to be. Chapter 10: Becoming the Confident Man. As I reached the culmination of my transformative journey, I realized that I had become the confident man I had always wanted to be. In No More Mr. Nice Guy, I found the guidance and inspiration to shed the shackles of the nice guy syndrome and embrace my true self with assertiveness and confidence. Becoming the confident man was not an overnight process, it was the result of continuous self-reflection, growth, and determination. I had navigated through the chapters of identifying patterns, embracing authenticity, setting boundaries, finding my purpose, building self-reliance, and embracing vulnerability. Each step paved the way towards a more empowered and fulfilled version of myself. Confidence was no longer about seeking external validation or approval from others. It came from within, from recognizing my worth, trusting my abilities, and accepting myself for who I was, imperfections and all. I carried myself differently, with a newfound sense of self-assurance that radiated in my interactions with others. I spoke up without fear, expressing my thoughts and feelings with clarity and assertiveness. I no longer felt the need to please everyone or seek approval. I stood firm in my values and convictions. Becoming the confident man also meant celebrating my successes without downplaying them. I embraced my accomplishments, big and small, and used them as stepping stones towards even greater heights. I had learned to appreciate the journey, finding fulfillment in every step of progress. Confidence allowed me to take risks and step outside my comfort zone. Instead of being paralyzed by fear of failure, I approached challenges with a can-do attitude, knowing that I had the resilience and strength to handle whatever came my way. In my relationships, I built deeper connections based on authenticity and mutual respect. I attracted people who appreciated and valued me for who I truly was. The relationships I formed were no longer based on trying to please others, they were genuine, fulfilling, and meaningful. Becoming the confident man didn't mean that I had all the answers or that I was immune to self-doubt. It meant that I had the courage to face uncertainty with grace and to seek support when needed. I had learned that vulnerability was not a weakness but a strength that deepened my connections with others. As I looked back on my journey, I felt immense gratitude for the lessons I had learned and the growth I had experienced. No More Mr. Nice Guy had been a guiding light, helping me transform from a people pleaser into a man who lived life on his terms, unapologetically authentic and confidently assertive. My friend, as you read about my transformation into the confident man, I encourage you to embark on your own journey of self-discovery and growth. Embrace the principles shared in No More Mr. Nice Guy and apply them to your life. With each step, you'll move closer to becoming the man you desire to be, a man who stands tall in his authenticity, embraces vulnerability, and exudes the unwavering confidence that comes from knowing and accepting oneself. Remember, the journey may have challenges, but the reward of becoming the confident man you were meant to be is well worth the effort. Epilogue: Sharing the Wisdom. As I reflect on my transformative journey, I realize that my growth and evolution were not meant to be kept to myself. The wisdom I gained from No More Mr. Nice Guy and my experiences should be shared with others, so they too can embark on their paths of self-discovery and empowerment. In sharing the wisdom, I hope to inspire and empower other men who may be struggling with similar challenges. I want them to know that they are not alone, that there is a way to break free from the patterns that hold them back, and that they can become the confident, authentic, and assertive individuals they aspire to be. I will encourage others to identify the patterns in their lives that may be hindering their growth. By shedding light on these patterns, they can take the first step towards understanding and change. Embracing authenticity will be another crucial lesson I share. It is a reminder that being true to oneself is not selfish, but an essential step towards finding fulfillment and genuine connections. Setting boundaries is a skill that many men struggle with, but it is vital for building healthy relationships and protecting one's own well-being. I will encourage others to communicate their needs and desires assertively, recognizing that it is okay to say no when necessary. Finding one's purpose and building self-reliance are interconnected. I will emphasize the importance of pursuing passions and setting meaningful goals, reminding others that they have the power to create the life they desire. I will also emphasize the significance of embracing vulnerability. It takes courage to be open and honest about one's feelings, but doing so can lead to more profound connections and personal growth. Throughout my journey, I learned the value of celebrating progress, a lesson I will share with others. Recognizing and appreciating the steps taken towards personal growth is essential for maintaining motivation and self-esteem. Finally, I will emphasize the importance of self-compassion. Men often put immense pressure on themselves to be strong and perfect, but accepting one's imperfections with kindness and understanding is crucial for personal growth and well-being. In sharing the wisdom gained from No More Mr. Nice Guy and my journey, I hope to create a ripple effect of positive change in the lives of others. I want every man to realize that he has the power to transform his life, embrace his authentic self, and become the confident man he aspires to be. My friend, as you embark on your own journey, I encourage you to share the wisdom you gain along the way. By empowering others to break free from limiting patterns and embrace their true selves, you contribute to a world filled with strong, authentic, and confident individuals. Together, we can inspire positive change and create a future where every man feels empowered to live life on his terms, unapologetically authentic and confidently assertive.